Hi. So yesterday, I was in a meeting, and a member of our security at the campus where I work came to visit our meeting and showed us a video called Run, Hide, Fight. And the subtitle is Surviving an Active Shooter Event. If I could recommend something, I would recommend a subtitle called Time You Will Never Get Back. This was actually really, and I know that I'm generally a person who's not big on pro-state power and police authority and things like that, but this was offensive on virtually every single level that I can possibly think of. In fact, let me just pause a second and say that the best piece of advice that I think you can get out of the film, like real practical value things that might help you survive, would be if you're trying to hide from someone who wants to kill you, you should turn off your cell phone. This advice, by the way, can also be gleaned from a wide array of horror movies made after 2000 when cell phones became widely available, and literally anyone who's ever played hide-and-go-seek. But still, it was good advice. I think that's easy to forget, you know, so... but the question is why? Why do we need to have this? Why this attention on a potential campus shooter? Well, I still don't really have an answer to that question, although I think that I come up with a reasonable answer to that question, I think, by the end of this little discussion. As you can tell, looking at these figures here, you have a ridiculously small chance of being caught in any kind of mass shooting event. That yes, they are a problem. There's a concern here. The numbers, especially in the United States, of mass shootings are really, really disturbing. But let's not neglect the fact that if you are on a campus like I am, you're far more likely to be hurt falling down the stairs than you are in an active shooter event. If you're genuinely concerned about safety, let's get some rubberized guards on those stairs. You know, like there's just no reason why we need to have metal caps on the end of stairs anymore, or crumbling, you know, sidewalks. Like those are real serious issues that we need to deal with, and they are much more likely to actually kill you than an active shooter is. Right, so now let's take a look at this video, right? Because I want you to get a sense of what I've been watching. I think that you should get a chance to experience it too. So we're just going to start off with the first few seconds here. And notice that music?
It may feel like just another day at the office, but occasionally, life feels more like an action movie than reality.
Wow. We're what? We are 17 seconds in to the film here, the video. And already I think that I have reached a point where I'm like, this is going to be bad. In fact, I got to be honest with you. I sat down thinking it was going to be bad. I was 17 seconds into it where I was like, no, it's going to be much, much, much worse than I thought it was going to be. Life is not like a television series, and it's not like an action movie. In fact, first-person shooter or active shooter events are not like action movies. They are, in fact, terrifying, horrible events that cannot be compared to an entertainment medium. And the wildly insensitive approach of comparing, you know, what happens to people at, you know, the University in Oregon and at the Columbine, you know, that this is like an action movie is just frighteningly insensitive and amazingly obtuse. I can't think of a more offensive way to have begun this film, right? Surprising, though, because I think there's so many offensive ways to have begun this film. I never expected this uniquely awful and offensive maneuver, right? But there are some people who think that first-person or active shooting is like a video game or like a movie, and that's sometimes the disturbed people who commit these violent acts, right? And that, I think, is really, really upsetting, because you're going to see this parallel emerge later, you know, of where the line between the mentality of the shooter and the mentality of the person who's trying to protect us from the shooter don't really seem to be discernibly that different from one another, right? They both think that they're in movies, at least some of the time, right? So the question I want to begin with, right, and I think that when you want to, like, analyze a video, analyze a movie, your question is, right, like, what's going on here? What is the purpose? Because remember, everything is purposeful. It's been shot, it's been edited, it's been cut, it's been put together. This looks like it probably was done on a Mac in somebody's basement, but, you know, that's okay. We're going to talk about editing later. We got some real editing issues that are going to come up later, right? But the ding, 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 the music, the tension, right? All of this is about trying to escalate the fear. And that's going to be a theme that you see throughout this, is that the video's function, right, is not to be like, here's practical things that you can do so you can be less afraid or more confident in the event that something like that comes up. That is not the effect of this video. It's clearly designed to produce the opposite effect, which is to ratchet up and drive up and escalate your fear, to heighten your anxiety, right? That's clearly what's happening here. Okay, and that means I've got to really stop at this point, and I raise what I think is an absolutely imperative question, and one that is actually also a rhetorical question, because we all know what the answer is. Should our approach be driven by reason or driven by fear? Because remember, these things are not compatible, all right? By design, fear overwhelms reason. Okay, there are very few incidences, very few situations in which not thinking is better than just acting, right? Or acting without thinking is the best thing to do, right? And those are situations in which there's an immediate threat to your life, right? You know, if a tiger is jumping out at you, you don't be like, I wonder what the best strategy. No, you run, you fight, you hide, you do all the things that this video wants you to do, because those are actually instinctive. You didn't need to be trained in run, hide, fight, right? Fight or flight, oh my God. Anyway, all right. Okay, but the fact of the matter is that fear is proto-emotional, right? It triggers a response in your body, right? And that frightening people is a great way to motivate them, because fear, you know, floods the body with adrenaline. It creates that impetus, that drive, that need to act in a way to alleviate the unpleasant condition that the fear is, right? It's a negatively valenced emotion, to borrow a phrase from one of the experts in fear appeals, a researcher used about at Michigan State University named Kim Whitty, right? Anyway. Okay, so what you need to remember, okay, is that everything about how you process this film, right, the way you process it within 17 seconds of the beginning of the film, right, you're beginning to process the film less critically, you're thinking about it with less reason, you're analyzing it less, and your anxiety rate is heightened up, right? And that is a design element of the film, right? They're using music strategies from horror films, for heaven's sakes, right? So, okay, all right, let's roll the film. We got so much more we want to talk about here. So, all right. We got to get past 15 seconds. All right, there we go.
The authorities are working hard to protect you and to protect our public spaces.
Okay, let's pause it there, because I think that actually, yeah, we're less than 40 seconds into the film, and we've already reached, I think, some really important things here, right? First.
Sometimes bad people do
what?
bad things.
Let me back that up, because I don't want you to hear that. That was my screen.
But sometimes bad people do bad things.
Bad people do bad things. Let's talk about that, right? Because run, hide, fight, or surviving an active shooting event. This is really much more about being afraid of an active shooting event, right? And that's really well developed as we go on. But what I'm really super skeptical, the authorities are working hard to protect our public spaces. This is a fascinating statement that they make, right? Because it actually is at odds with what you see developing and happening behind you in the film. And what I want you to gravitate your attention on, and feel free to go back and look at this and you'll see, is that, you know, your workspace, first of all, is not public, which means your safety, right, is the responsibility of this guy right here. This is the first time we see him. We're at 18 seconds into the film. He's the blue-shirted security guard that's in the background. Notice he's very, very tall. We see him again only a few seconds later. He's put in the background of another angle. Then we see him again, right? We keep seeing him. He appears, in fact, within about the first 40 seconds of the film, he appears no fewer than 5 separate times, right? Why? What's the importance? Well, later on, we're going to see him again at about 1 minute and 13 seconds into the film. He's going to be standing there chatting up some woman with his back turned as the shooter enters the building and takes out his shotgun, right? And in fact, our poor security guard here is the first poor fella to die when the events begin to unfold. And what this all does, like why? And remember, nothing in the film is accidental. Everything is in the film by design, and there is a point to the film. And the point is not to make you feel better. We've already established that. If you want to make me feel better, then why are you playing Tinkle, Tinkle, Tinkle horror music in the background as you're doing it, okay? The deep, deep, deep waiting for the killer to approach. So what is the reason? Why does the security guard appear so many times in the film? Well, there's a very clear message here, which is that this guy is not going to be able to protect you. You know, whatever this fella brings to the table, it is not going to be enough. That friendly, happy, he chats you up, he talks to you, he walks with you to the elevator, that fellow is not going to be able to protect you, right? And so fear, the inadequacy of your current measures. You are not safe because this guy is not going to be there to protect you. Now, oh, I get it. I'm reading too much into it. I do that. You're right. I do that. That is true. So let's just watch some more video and see where it goes. And I'll admit the possibility that maybe I've read too much into this. You know, I'm putting things into it that just aren't there. All right, we got to skip up to 40 seconds now. 38 seconds actually is where we left off.
Do bad things. Their motivations are different. The warning signs may vary, but the devastating effects are the same.
Now, okay. Just gotta stop right there. Oop. Okay. Look what else can't stop him. The warning sign on the door. You all thought I was, the security guard, like I was reading too much into that. Well, here we have another, here's another thing that we, foolish people rely on to protect us in our lives. Not just unarmed, amiable security guards, but also signs on doors that say, weapons are prohibited, no guns, those kind of things. And look what he does. He walks right through that door with the sign. And now again, you can be like, well, Jim. Those signs appear on the outsides of lots of buildings. They filmed him going into a building. I'm sure there was a sign that was already there. Well, that is not only naive, it's demonstrably false. Let's see, right? Okay, here he is walking up the steps, okay? This is, I got to look at the timestamp. I want to say this is 57 seconds, I think, at this. Here he is going in. Oh, no, that was 56 seconds. He's going up. Now, you notice there is no sign on that door. There is nothing about firearms on those doors as he goes up. Here he is at 57 seconds. He's walked through the door. Here's the door open. Here's the door closing a little bit further again at 58 seconds, and here, magically appearing on the door at 59 seconds is the sign. In fact, if you watch it, this is one of the most clumsily edited little bits of film that you've ever seen, right? The door literally, just jumps closed by about 5 inches. It goes from 5 inches open to closed, and this thing just immediately appears on it, right? So what that means is that they have the shot of the door closing, and they go back and say, no, we want that door to show this message, right? That message is deliberately inserted to show the inadequacy of this as a measure to protect you and keep you safe. Now, again, Jim, you're reading into it. Give me a better explanation, all right? That's what I want. Don't tell me I'm reading too much into stuff unless you can provide me with a better explanation for why that jump in the video takes place, why that editing is there, and why that is inserted. If not to demonstrate the inadequacy of these other methods. And that inadequacy, what's it about doing, right? It's building up the fear. But Even if you don't, even if you're like, Jim, I don't buy your interpretation, Jim, I don't buy your analysis, you at minimum, I think at this point, have to admit that you're being manipulated, right? That somebody spliced that image into it for a reason to create an effect, and that means that there's some effect that somebody's after. And your question is what? Your question is why, okay? If my answer's not the right one, then you need to tell me why are you being manipulated in this way. You explain it. All right, let's watch some more video. Whew. You know what, actually? I don't think we do. I think I can just skip down to talk about my other thing. Yeah, I'm sorry. I do. I can talk about this. And this is the idea of how, you know, that what's the explanation? Why do active shooters take place? What's the motive? What's the reasoning? And the answer, well, sometimes bad people do bad things, right? That's our answer. Wow. Now that's a simplistic interpretation of the whole phenomenon, right? I'm amazed because there's study out there, and that I don't know if it has ever been established as a matter of any kind of scientific or statistically demonstrable fact. In fact, this is like Charles Ingalls' explanation, right? You know, Laura Ingalls Wilder in the old Little House on the Prairie crawls up into his lap and is like, why did the baby get cancer, Pa? And he's like, well, half pint, bad things happen to bad people. Like, I don't know, right? I don't know what it, but this is the most absolutely ludicrous, childlike interpretation of events that I've ever come across. Except it's really not. Except really it's much more sophisticated, and it's much more dangerous, I think, than we're talking about here. And it's very easy to just kind of roll our eyes and treat it like it's dumb. That's what I did when I first saw it. But when you unpack it, it's actually much, much worse, right? Okay? Because he's going to go on to say, listen, the motives, the warning signs, those all change, but the devastating effects remain the same, right? That's actually a direct lift from the narration, right? This isn't simplistic. It's really sophisticated, really scary, right? Because these things are irrelevant. Why? Because that's not where we're focusing our attention. We're focusing our attention on the effects. And here's the idea. Here's our explanation. Crime and violence are personal moral failings, right? Now, why is that important? Because if this is the result of mental illness, if this is the result of social alienation, right? I mean, you want to talk about workplace crime? How about we talk about the fact that people are working 60-hour weeks and they're not getting paid for them? How about that? What is the effect that causes to work exponentially longer hours or ridiculously longer hours? No increasing benefits. You're losing, you know, a real value of your dollar. Your health care is being eroded. All of these things are taking place. You know, like maybe that might cause somebody to snap. Now, I'm not justifying or rationalizing, but notice how at this point we've stopped asking why. It has become an absolutely irrelevant question to the debate of why these things take place. The only thing that matters to us is that we stop them. It is literally, right, the put them down like a dog theory of the first-person shooter, that these things are unpreventable. We're not going to waste our time trying to figure out what causes them or what we can do to stop them, right? We're not going to talk about expanding medical care on our campus. We're not going to talk about, you know, like that we only let students have, what, like 3 visits to a mental health professional a semester, like on our campus, right? No, those are irrelevant considerations because sometimes bad people do bad things and we need to put them down like dogs. That's the end of the story, right? So, yeah, now, okay, let's go back here, because I actually want to show some more video now, because we're now talking about the plan stuff, and I think that's super important. So we're going to roll ahead now. We're going to skip past where he actually starts shooting people.
There are 3 things you could do that make a difference. Run, hide, fight. First,
fight. I love that. I love how he like drops that pitch on the word fight, right? There's the run, hide, fight, right? Okay, it's the long pause that builds the suspense and the drop in pitch that makes it this definitive, absolutely necessary kind of thing. And in fact, the necessity of violence is going to be another one of the major themes. But I want to introduce you to this guy, right? He is an important figure. We're going to see him, you know, several other times, right, throughout the video, because he is our man with a plan. He appears at the point in the video when the narrator is talking about the importance of having a plan, right? So he's going to appear. Now, okay, if you are ever in an active shooter event, your survival may depend on whether or not you have a plan. I love that, okay? Not will depend, might depend. But of course, that's true of literally any situation that you might find yourself in, right? You know, if you're on your way to the Mall of America, your survival might depend on whether or not you have a plan. Right? It might depend on whether or not you have a flat tire plan, or what to do if you're out of gas plan, or what to do if you lose your keys plan, right? There's all kinds of things that you might need a plan for. Here's the thing. There are few things that you can find more research on than mass shooting events, right? Lots of people out there studying mass shooting events. I have not seen, this is argumentum ad ignorantum, I'm aware of it, right? I haven't seen the evidence. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I have not seen one study, one effort to collect data that says these are the strategies people use that seem to work to keep them alive, and these are the things people try to do that kill them, right? Has there ever been an analysis of like these lockdowns, right? Have lockdowns shown like, hey, in these cases, since we started instituting lockdowns, this is how many lives we've saved, or the lethality of killings has gone down? There's no effort to even analyze whether or not any of these techniques, you know, training sessions, added security guards, lockdowns, automatic locking doors, any of these kind of star alert systems that text you warnings, not one shred of evidence that indicates that these things have had any demonstrable effect on reducing the lethality of shooter violence. It is an absolute lie to say that this video is about surviving a first-person shooter event, because aside from telling you to silence your cell phone if you're hiding from someone, there's not one technique here that is beyond a halfpenny's worth of common sense and actually fear-induced instinctive behavior. Running, hiding, and fighting, right? Your fight or flight emotions is what happens when your body's flooded with adrenaline, right? Not one thing here to indicate that a plan, a poster on the wall, any of these things has saved even one human life in the event of a first-person shooting, right? We've studied it, we got lots and lots of data, and the data, actually, it's fascinating. You read this particular report by the FBI, and it concludes with, well, you know, clearly we need more training, right? Not one indication that you can develop a profile of a active shooter, that you can say this is what typically happens in an active shooting event. These are responses that have been proven to work in an event. Not one thing to indicate that it's even possible to generate that kind of data, much less that a training program is going to do anything more than put somebody into a heightened state of fear and anxiety. And I think that after going through a short session, that's exactly what the result was. Nobody walked out of our session feeling like, I know what to do. In fact, we had all kinds of questions about our responsibility vis-a-vis students. We didn't get answers to those. About, you know, what we can do, what kind of advanced steps we can take. None of that, right? Okay, call 911, run, hide, fight if you have to. Those essentially are the things that we're doing, okay? So anyway, all right, no study ever been produced. All right, so then if that's true, where's all this advice coming from? Like, who's generating this advice? That's a really excellent question, and let's go back to the video, because I think we're going to answer that at the conclusion. All right, run, hide, fight. I think we already talked about that. Just one quick note, right? Run, hide, fight. Thank you. What wonderful series of alternatives that you have provided for us here. A video from Houston, Texas, and the Department of Homeland Security. I guess you've eliminated all kinds of other realistic options that one might take in a first-person shooter event, right? You know, like, what else am I going to do? Somebody's firing a gun potentially at me in a building. You know, well, okay, could get out some gum. Like 4 out of 5 dentists who chew gum do think you should chew Dentyne, right? So that might be a good... What the hell, man? This is just a ridiculous kind of thing. So let's go to the video. All right. Oh, we need to jump up. Here we go.
3 things you could do that make a difference.
Let's watch
Run, hide, fight. First and foremost, if you can get out, do. Always try and escape or evacuate, even when others insist on staying. Encourage others to leave with you, but don't let them slow you down with indecision.
We'll run outside.
Remember what's important. You, not your...
This is great. This is awesome. Let's do some more. Let's unpack this a little bit more. We're introduced to 2 more characters here. you have this woman, right? She hears the shooting and then looks down the hall and then literally stands at her desk not knowing what to do. Why? Because she's not the man in the blue shirt. She's not the man with the plan, right? Okay, when he comes along, though, he's got her. He's like, yes, I have a plan. I will lead you to safety. And at this point now, she has been activated. Like she was in a game of freeze tag, and he's touched her, and now she can move, right? And then she grabs this hysterical woman who's hiding under her desk and crying, right? And then we're going to lead her outside, and then, man with the plan, man with the blue shirt who knows what to do, he's going to run over and save the guy with headphones who doesn't know that there's a shooting going on because he's got his earbuds in, and he's about to go into the building. Oh, no, we have to save him. So he's a courage. He doesn't just have a plan. He has courage, right? We get back over here, and she's still hysterical. Like, help us, right? They're calling 911, and she's shrieking irrelevant information at the police, right? Yep, that's exactly what's going on. Why? Because this film is just insanely sexist. Let's watch some more, right?
Into the danger zone.
See that?
Get out safely. You need to...
Now we have our other goal, right? We've gone from run, now we're on hide.
Act quickly and quietly.
All right, okay. Let's do some more. Let's look at some more stuff, right? We've entered into a new scenario here, right? Up. Okay, we're now in the break room. These people are trapped. They've got nowhere to run. Their only option now is to hide. Let's talk about what's going on here, right? Because we have, again, two women in this scenario. But notice this second woman. Again, she's hysterical, right? She's the one who's going to start crying. But even notice how one woman, she's put together, she's got her hair up in a do and everything. This woman looks like she's already been panicked, right? Her hair is just in disarray, and she's freaking out right from the start. And eventually, she's going to end up down on the floor, and then when the other people start doing stuff, she's going to end up curling up in the corner, weeping and crying. That's really her role in this film, is to be the weeping and crying woman, right? And this you see again here. You know, these are very side characters in our plot. These are the folks who come running out of the building. Once again, notice that it's a man who's leading them, and in this case, you've got a man following up. And as you follow them run through the video, you'll see him like shepherding her and protecting her. You know, which all is about the gender politics of this particular video suck. They absolutely suck. Okay, there's just simply no way that this should have gotten by any kind of video editing or proofer, right? Like who does that? Who says, you know what, I'm going to make a video, it's going to be how to survive a first-person shooting. I'm not going to actually provide any tips on first-person shoot or active shooter survival. I'm just going to like put out that women are depicted as incapable of acting on their own, requiring the shepherding and guidance of men. And in many cases, they're actually a burden to be managed, right? They're a problem to be overcome. And also notice in every single instance, who is it that's responsible for dealing with the hysterical woman? It's another woman, right? She's given that responsibility. There are no hysterical men. There are no nurturing men. Men are decisive agents of action. Men pick up weapons and direct others to do so. You look again in that kind of break room scene. It's the tall guy, the white guy, incidentally, who takes control of the situation. He's quieting people down. He directs the barricading of the doors. He gets people lined up and ready to fight when the situation comes. The gender politics absolutely suck. Let's watch some more. All right. We're going to go a little further now. A little further. Past that. Right. Okay. We're past hide. Now we're talking about fighting. We're going to get past the fight situation here.
No matter what.
That's really interesting, because that's the last second you actually see that guy.
Try to be aware of your environment.
At this point, right?
Always have an exit plan. Know that in an incident like this, Victims are generally chosen randomly. The event is unpredictable and may evolve quickly. The first responders on the scene are not there to evacuate or tend to the injured. They are well trained and are there to stop the shooter.
Now this is really good. Let's keep going on this because there's a lot that just happened there that we should talk about, right? Okay. The first is this is the first time we see these fellows appear on the scene, right? Now this is the first time we have a genuine solution to the problem that's appeared for us. And what is the solution to a man with a gun? It's 4 men with guns. That's how we solve problems, right? Now, notice that and this is something that I think that the producers of the film probably were inattentive to. Do you notice how these 2 guys, the heroes who are here to save us and the killer who's here to threaten us, are virtually the same in terms of their demeanor, their stance, their pose. They both conduct themselves with this kind of military-like action. Okay, this is really concerning. Okay, I'm sure that what the guys who are doing there is like, I want to look like a badass, scary, first or active shooter guy. Well, that's actually the police. Like, we want to look like badass, scary SWAT team people, right? The same kind of culture of violence infuses both of these types of shooters. And in fact, what's really, really, I think, the dangerous element of this film, or the most disturbing element for me, is the way that we are conditioned to uncritically accept violence by the state as being not only legitimate, the right thing to do, but the only really rational and justifiable response to these kinds of situations, right? Now notice, this guy, he isn't in our story anymore. We didn't mind showing him shooting innocent people outside the hallway, but what you don't see is you don't see this guy getting riddled with bullets by the SWAT team. That doesn't happen in this scenario. You don't see him committing suicide with his own weapon. Also, something that is really likely to have happened, right? Because here's the thing. Although these guys are presented as the ones who are coming in to save the day and solve the problem, right? They're the antithesis of our fat security guard who didn't do shit when it was important to do so at the first onset of this shooting, right? Okay, they're well trained and here to stop the shooter. Okay, well, first of all, that's not what this training looks like, okay? This is not how SWAT teams are trained to go through and sweep a building, okay? It is, in fact, terrifying, violent, and scary, right? Okay? But here they come. They're the response. Up to this point, we've got mad dogs who just need to be put down. We've got ineffectual and half-assed measures that are here to protect us. So finally, we have the safety of a SWAT team and cops armed with flak jackets and automatic weapons. Now I feel so much safer, right? Okay, but here's the deal. The fact of the matter is they're not there to stop the shooter. They are there to actually see what happened after it was entirely over, overwhelmingly, right? 60% of the time the incident is over before the police get there, right? So they don't play any role. So if that's the case, right, in fact, if your job is to prepare for the most likely scenarios, the most likely scenario they're going to encounter is a shooter that's either fled the scene or killed himself, right, or been subdued by people with fire extinguishers and break rooms, right? That's also a possibility, right? But in a significant number of the events, right, over 30% of the events, the whole thing is over in 2 minutes or less, long before police and SWAT teams ever arrive on the scene. So the first responsibility should be policing and saving the lives of the people who are down, right? Okay, if somebody were running in with medical kits wearing a flak jacket, I would feel as though that was our priority. But in fact, actually, it's this kind of inscription of power, right? So we got to remember that even though this is a ridiculously unlikely event, the need for a SWAT team on scene is even less likely, right? In fewer than half of an incredibly unlikely, statistically improbable event are you going to need anyone dressed up as a SWAT team. So why do we have so many freaking SWAT teams? That's a really interesting question here, because when you look at actually people who are studying policing in America, literally everyone is concerned about the militarization, the over-arming, the SWATifying of literally every single policeman that we have that's out there, right? Now they're all wearing flak jackets and have access to automatic weapons, okay? And frankly, I think it's really, really interesting what gets studied. Do we study shootings? Yes, absolutely we do. We study the heck out of mass shootings, right? The FBI is very interested in mass shootings. They are not really interested when the mass shootings are done by police, right? That data is actually impossible to find good, clear data on because they simply don't track it. In terms of the figures that I found that between 1,489 and 1,082 people were killed by police, right? Okay, now, that's as compared with 160 incidences of mass shootings, okay, and 1,043 casualties, right? Only 486 people actually died. Now, only 486, that's a huge and unacceptable number, right? Okay, but the casualties don't even reach the low estimate of what the fatalities from police shootings are. And, because this gets even more messed up, that data only covers a 3-year period, 2003, 4, and 5, right? That's a 3-year period as opposed to the 13-year period of the FBI study on mass shootings, which means that more than twice and as many as 3 times as many people in this country are killed by the police in less than less than a quarter, of the time, right? This is just massive misallocation and misdirection of where our concerns really ought to be if we're concerned about violence in our society. 76 people, right, between 2000, I think, and 2014, these are like verified cases of people of color who were not armed, gunned down by the police, right? And who are the most likely victims? The poor, people of color, immigrants, the mentally handicapped, the mentally ill, right? These are the people who are gunning down. The absolute most vulnerable populations of our society are the most subject to police violence. And for them, the fact of the matter is that police violence, right, first-person shootings, or not first-person, active shooting events, 11.4 times a year in the last 13 years. That's scary. How many SWAT team raids are there, on people? And this is 45,000 SWAT raids every single year. 124 homes every day, often at night when people are sleeping, have these police bursting in, flak jackets, automatic weapons, shotguns, flashlights, flashbang grenades, and most of these are just to serve search warrants. There's no indication that they're meeting a violent resistance inside the apartment building. These are the kinds of warrants that could just as easily be executed by people coming in and knocking on the door and saying, we have a warrant to search your property. Even if they came in followed by people who have guns and vests, or even if the guy who knocked on the door had a gun and a vest. Nope. Burst in, flashbang grenades, like this moving through the hall, quietly searching through bathroom stalls. That's just not how SWAT teams operate. I think it's also really important to remember what SWAT teams do. They're just as often deployed for purposes of crowd control as they are for purposes of first-person shooters. In fact, in a really bizarre kind of irony here, SWAT teams are often what they call out when regular police violate people's civil rights, gun them down in the street, and that kind of thing. The SWAT team is an anti-crowd measure. It's used to silence, to constrain political dissent in this country all the time. And believe me, I will tell you this as God's own truth, man. There is nothing scarier than marching around surrounded by, than trying to make your point of view heard, trying to make people pay attention to you when you're surrounded by men in armor and with machine guns, with bandoliers of flashbang grenades and tear gas canisters on them. They're incredibly frightening, and they're used to silence dissent in this country. Because, see, this is what happens, right? This scenario is incredibly unlikely. It's incredibly unlikely, but what have we done? We ramped up your fear, we made you feel afraid, and then we provided you with only one real solution. Lots of men with flak jackets and guns. That's the solution to the problem, right? So you now want one of these. You're like, we need these. Believe me, that's exactly what this film is designed to do. It is a propaganda film That's its function, right? You're infused with fear, right? You're given a need to act. Your ability to think critically about what you're acting on is mitigated by design and structure of the work, right? Police violence and power is absolutely legitimized, and you're given this need for more and better police power in our both public and our private lives, right? Okay, remember something. The private security industry in the United States is a $30+ billion a year industry, right? And that's just supplying security services. Guns got to be made. Bullets got to be made. Less than lethal bullets got to be made. Beanbag bullets. Armor, the ceramic, the Kevlar. All of these things are incredibly important, and they're aspects of the industrialization of security and safety in our country, the security industrial complex, which profits so much from this culture of violence and fear that's going on, right? Also, we need to remember that there's a straight-up revolving door between our private security agencies and our public security agencies, right? So if you're chief of police in one town, boom, you move over and you become head of a private security agency or the face of a private security agency, and then you use that to sell products and services and consulting and training programs to these city services, to state government, local government, and federal government, right? That's where this is coming from. This is a propaganda film designed to justify ramping up the need for private and public security and heavily arming and training those systems, right? And if you look at it right there, folks, you paid for this video. In fact, this video, right, this propaganda film was made, right, by a taxpayer grant in order to justify the existence of the program, right? I mean, what the hell? How is this even remotely legal in a democratic society? That an organization, that an engine of state power can create propaganda to justify its own existence and to justify expanding its role and expanding its power, new weapons, new armored security vehicles, more flashbang grenades, more bandoliers of wooden bullets, you know, all of this kind of thing. It's absolutely